This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remus.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday to you. The weekend just about here. But first, let's bang out another fun episode of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily heading into the weekend. Great to have you with us. Andrew Paterson without Michael Remus. But I have some great news. Some great news for especially the Friday regulars. I know we had told you that we would be taking a 1-week hiatus from the marble race, but I can tell you after much consultation between Remo on the road and Alex, who's been doing such a great job this week, there will be marbles today. There will be marbles. And hey, coming off such a great night last night at IG Field, how could we not finish off the week in true WST form? So make sure you stick around on the YouTube channel. At the end of the program, we will call for entries. We will drop the marbles, and it'll be a heck of a great way to finish up today's program and another great week. First things first, what a night last night. We're going to get into it, and really looking forward to having Hammer back on the program today, chop it up. I mean, we're going to hit a number of the topics, but let's face it, this show today, at least to begin with, is going to be all about the Bombers getting to 10-1 last night. The incredible atmosphere, lots of fun crowd stories as well, which I'll get to. But first and foremost, a massive win, and the Bombers sweep the Calgary Stampeders 3-0 in their season series. Just before we get going, I do want to thank the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Our friends over at CoolBet Canada, of course, Princess Auto, Canadian Club, Assiniboia Downs, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Little Brown Jug, Not Auto Corp, Breezy Bend, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, Culligan Water, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, and of course, our friends over at Vita Health. So, rundown for today. Hammer and I are going to chop it up, talking Bombers and much more for the first 40, 45 minutes of the show or so. Rewucki will come on for his weekly visit. I'm sure he's got some takes on last night's game. We'll also get to maybe a little bit of hockey talk, although as you well know, especially if you've been with us this week, there hasn't been much to talk about Jets-wise or with moves of the National Hockey League, although I'm sure he'll have some takes on Phil Kessel going to the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And then after 2 p.m., really looking forward to having my guy Chris Meaney come on. And Meaney, who you know him from FTN Bets, and if you've ever seen the Rod Paterson show on the Game Plus network, Mean Streets is a show that Chris does on Game Plus. One of just a great analyst, I would say, when it comes to numbers, especially when it comes to fantasy sports. And man, there's a lot to get to with the NFL in full swing for preseason, and you've got a fantasy draft next week. So we'll talk a little NFL and more with Meaney later on. And then to finish up the program, it will be marbles time. So without Remus, usually we kick it around for a little bit before getting serious on the program. I'll welcome everyone in on YouTube. Shout out to the gang, and great to see everyone that I saw at the game last night. But without further ado, let's get the Hammer in here and get this thing going. A little Friday special visit from Jeff K. Hamilton himself. Hammer, what's going on? How are you?
Haas, not too bad, man. Twice in 1 week. I'm sure that's for some people that's good news. For others, they're wondering if you guys care about the ratings over there. But let's hash into everything that's sports. It's good to be on,
dude. Come on, you bring him in as always. And I'll say this: I mean, what a perfect day to do this, because there is just so much to get to coming out of last night's game. I'm almost at a loss for words. First and foremost, just the atmosphere at these games so far. I mean, we were going to talk about, everything that happened in an absolute classic between the Bombers and the Calgary Stampeders last night. I'm sure you were up in the press box. I mean, let me just ask you. I mean, What was it like? You've been to a lot of these games. You have seen certainly the support for this team grow over the last few years. And I got to say, game after game, dating back to the Calgary game, which was in July, which was just a phenomenal evening, a hot and a hell of a game, to the Montreal game, and then to last night. I mean, these games, in addition to the incredible action on the field, the Bombers continuing to raise the bar for a pretty impossibly high standard, the fans have been doing it too. I mean, that was a scene last night at IG Field.
Yeah, man. And like you said, it's been like that since really, I mean, for most of the season, but really dating back to that first home game against Calgary, that really felt like a playoff atmosphere. I wrote after that game that, I can usually, so I obviously watched the game. I have my binoculars on, so I'm checking out plays pretty close live, and then I usually rewatch them on TSN. So I have TSN's, online feed on my laptop, and more often than not, I can hear the audio of the game through my headphones. Well, I haven't been able to do that this season with the fans, and it's it really is a credit to them and how loud they are. The games have all been, for the most part, close at home all season for the Bombers, really. I mean, there's a few that they've definitely pulled away from, but it's made for incredible football for fans to see. It's funny. I have these moments throughout the game where I peek into some of the stands, and I forget what the section is right behind the end zone. I'm sure you can mention
141.
141. I was going to say 142, but I felt like I was off by a section. But they're kind of right below the press box to a certain degree, and so I kind of peek over there and have moments during the game where I at times wish I was in the stands and not writing on my laptop. But it's just been an incredible atmosphere. I mean, and credit to the Bomber fans, credit to the Bombers organization too. I mean, the game day experience is second to none, in my opinion, in the CFL. I've been to a lot, I've been to all the stadiums, and a lot of teams put on good shows, but Winnipeg just, and part of that too is IG Field. I mean, IG Stadium. I feel like it's got that perfect atmosphere with the open concourse and of course the rum hut and everything. And again, as I said, credit to the Bombers. I mean, they win at home often and lots and have been dominant juggernauts in the league for years. So it's just all kind of coming to fruition. And certainly the fan crowd is appreciated by everybody in that locker room.
Now, I've got some funny stuff to talk about the crowd a little later on, and everyone knows that it was a big night for my wave takes last night. I will say that, but we won't get right into that because we do want to talk about the game overall. And Jeff, we're almost spoiled. I mean, you just mentioned how close many of these games are. It's sort of wild for a team that is 10-1 right now to, with a couple of exceptions, have really not run away with games. And for a team that has been so dominant on home field, there's been plenty of thrillers, and we got another one last night. But I'll say this, the Bombers are 3-0 and great teams win, and they found a way to win. And I'm sure the Calgary Stampeders are leaving Winnipeg last night or this morning thinking, like, what the hell do we have to do to beat these guys? But this was an incredible football game. And I mean, the Calgary Stampeders have to know that they are in these games. And I'd imagine that they'll have some confidence that they are this close if they do meet them in the playoffs. But as far as last night's go, I mean, it was back and forth right from the first quarter of the game. The Bomber offense started out hot, and then Jake Mayer came in and showed that Dave Dickinson knew what he was doing by tapping him on the shoulders to be Calgary starter last night.
Yeah, not to take another long trip to the buffet, but even before getting into Jake Mayer, which is just an incredible story, and I'm 100% behind you in Dave Dickinson's decision, and I think we're looking at the future right now behind center for the Stampeders. But if you look at what the Bombers have been able to do against Calgary, like it wasn't that long ago where the narrative was the Bombers almost needed a near miracle to beat the Stampeders. Heading into the 2019 season, they had lost 18 of their previous 20 games against Calgary. And one of those wins came at the end of the season when the Stampeders had already wrapped up the West. And it was kind of one of those, okay, feel goods for the Bombers, but, really meant nothing to Calgary. And then now if you look at 2019, the Bombers are 7-2 against the Stamps. They've flipped the script. One of those victories was, of course, in the West Final in 2019, en route to breaking that long Grey Cup drought. And one of those victories for the Stamps was when the Bombers sat their starters in the second half, and all things kind of went the other way for them, and they lost. So they've completely flipped the script. This is now, you talk about the fans and their excitement. Well, Calgary had a lot of ammo against the Winnipeg fans for years, and now they've turned the tables. But you look at Calgary, there will always be a healthy respect by the Bombers for the Stampeders. They know that they're likely to meet them in the playoffs this year. They certainly, even with a 3-0 series sweep, the first in 35 years dating back to 87, even with that, they know that all those games could have gone the other way. As we know, those were all one-score games. There was clear, last night's game was a thriller and could have easily ended with the Stamps winning. The one before that, or the last home game before that, was the Bombers were Kamar Jordan dropped that pass in the end zone that would have sealed it for Calgary. So there certainly has been a bit of luck on the Bombers side, but it's just been the case between these two rivals. Even with BC doing what they've done this season, there, as I mentioned, there's still that healthy respect that the Bombers have for the Stampeders, because they know how well coached they are, how well disciplined they are, how physical they are. And so when a team carries a lot of the same traits that you take pride in, you tend to have a lot of respect for them. So I'm not surprised at all with how close these games have been. At the same time, I'm not surprised the Bombers have come out on the winning edge of them, because they have found ways to win in each one of those games, much like Calgary used to do, even when they weren't playing their best for the better part of 10 seasons before the Bombers became the class of the CFL.
We have talked about this before. I still think back and laugh about the day that the Bombers acquired Zach Collaros at the trade deadline. We were on the air at 12:90. The deadline was at, 2 o'clock, I believe. And we got this notice at like 2:58 that the Bombers had acquired Zach Collaros. And I remember, if you do this every single day, you'll have good takes, you'll have bad takes. But I remember saying on the air, wow, this is interesting, and sort of joking that and the Bombers will have a first-round pick if they sign Zach Collaros afterwards. And we started joking, said, well, that'll be a good thing if they do, because it probably means they went all the way, which at the time seemed like an absolute pipe dream. But the domination of the Calgary Stampeders basically started with that acquisition, and the one regular season game that he played. We all remember the pass to Darwin Adams, and literally, since Zach Collaros got under center for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, one way or the other, they've owned the Calgary Stampeders for the last 3 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're writing the book of Zach Collaros and his time in Winnipeg, I think the chapters 1 and 2 are the trade, as you mentioned, that deadline acquisition. If anyone needs a reminder, it wasn't just a last minute trade. It required Jim Popp being fired from the Toronto Argonauts, a guy who wanted to sign Zach Collaros, and as the fable goes, had a multi-year contract in his desk drawer ready to be delivered, and then his departure led to John Murphy trading him over to Winnipeg, and so that there's that. And then, of course, as you alluded to, that dart to Darwin Adams in the corner of the end zone, the second chapter is the throw, because that really was the moment that not only they got over that maybe that curse against the Calgary Stampeders, but it really showed you what it was like to have a quarterback who was capable of doing that. It was capable of running, throwing on the run and accurately and deep into a corner in tight windows. And that's what we've seen from Zach Collaros ever since. I mean, yeah, is he risking more interceptions? Absolutely. But I would take, a couple interceptions. Now, I'm not saying a couple interceptions each game, but maybe a couple more than his predecessors behind center, if it means he's willing to throw it into tight windows that a lot of the guys who have been behind center for Winnipeg prior to Zach Collaros arriving would never even try. So, it really is, an incredible story about Collaros. It's incredible what he's been able to do for this team. It's incredible, what he brings to the team as far as not just his ability on the field, but the calmness and leadership off it. I mean, ask anybody on that team, and it's his personality and his competitiveness that has endeared him most to the team. He is a gamer. He's willing to extend plays. He's willing to, again, fit throws into tight windows, and he's a winner. This is a guy who was 30-0 as a high school football player, went on to college, helped Cincinnati get into important bowl games, and he's just always had that fire in him. So for him to be able to resurrect his career here and just establish himself as arguably, if not the best player in the CFL, is just a magical story, not just for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, for the guy, but for Collaros himself.
Yeah, it was, I've told this story a number of times, but I mean, that game was, of course, when the Jets and Flames were playing in Regina for the Heritage Classic. And we were in some bar. I don't even remember what it was. And, you had all these Jets fans, you had tons of Flames fans there. And even though the game wasn't a big, meaningful game, people paying attention to it. I remember looking at some of the guys I'm with after that play going, what the hell? Like, it was just something that we hadn't seen before. And needless to say, I mean, we see people mentioning that play, particularly in the chat, as a moment where you kind of went, oh my God, like maybe there is something special with this team. And obviously we know what happened in the playoffs going forward. Hey, great to see everybody in the chat today. Few people to say hi. Bridget saying, oh, who is the won the ticket? There's a few past. Peyton was there. I didn't see Peyton. David Asplin was a winner. And Isha Boy Bruce, who I did see at the game last night. Great to see the WSTers. It was a great night, and I have a feeling we might not have as many passes or any for the Banjo Bowl. We'll try and do that again a little bit later on. Back to Collaros for a minute, though, Jeff, and it pertains to last night's game. They were ready to go, and I do want to get to the offensive line because that, to me, I think was one of the most important things that was a major improvement, and we expected that coming off that week. But what would you think about Zach's game? I mean, I'm sure he'd be the first one to say he doesn't like the 2 picks, especially in the end zone. And to be honest, in such a close game, if you are turning the football over in the red zone twice, maybe you are fortunate to come out about winners. They got all that done. But this was overall another really strong game for Zach Collaros, but he would be the first one to say there's probably a couple he might have liked to have back.
Yeah, and he's always going to own that. And like I alluded to in my last answer, is those risks are going to happen when you're willing to make, tougher throws. In some of those cases, I mean, or in all of the cases, really, every time he does throw an interception, particularly the 2 in the end zone, the last night's game, Zach took ownership of it. He needs to be better in that. He needs to, he needs to be on point a bit more. But, at the same time, I mean, you could easily frame it as, he got picked off twice in the end zone. The Bombers could have easily lost that game, or you could say the Bombers shouldn't have been so close in that game because they got picked off twice in the end zone. So they left points on the field. So it does come down to how you want to frame it. But at the end of the day, I mean, the O-line, as you mentioned, they had taken a bit of a beating, right? They had taken a bit of the last 2 games against Montreal, 8 combined sacks, 5 in the second game. So, they needed to establish maybe some reputation back. It's a little hyperbolic to suggest because it is difficult to be critical of a team who is 9-1, and especially for an O-line that's been the class of the CFL for years, no doubt. But they got a lot, they have high expectations. So it's not just, the outside, it was internally too, knowing that they needed to get better. And I think they afforded, Zach a lot of time in the pocket. They certainly helped out with the run. There was a lot of guys involved in the run after, particularly after Brady Oliveira tweaked something, there in the second half. So, I thought it was an absolute incredible game plan by Buck Pierce. He got creative. He used a lot of guys. I mean, Greg McCrae, I mean, what can we say about that guy? He wasn't even going to be in the line or in the starting rotation, let alone play a factor in the game plan the way he did. So certainly a lot to like from the offense, and perhaps the most impressive outside of the 4 touchdowns it was, or 3 touchdowns, was the last 2:18. I mean, those are moments in the game that are usually take an eternity to play out, and the Bombers put together an 8-play drive. Threw a couple of those passes, but also got 20 yards and 4 runs from Johnny Augustine in that stretch. at a time when everybody knows you're running. We've talked about this before. This is when the big boys come out on the trenches and they both know exactly what's happening. And if you're able to push it the way the Bombers were the line of scrimmage, I mean, that's a great sign against a team in Calgary who racks up the sacks, that headed into the game leading in that category. And to keep them mostly at bay for much of the evening was an impressive feat, and it's certainly a rebound from the O-line.
Yeah, listen, the offensive line we talked about yesterday in the program, that was the one area I think the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were expecting to be much better. And I think there was an obvious benefit of, having a little bit of time off after that meat grinder of the first 10 games of the season playing through. But I was going to save this till later, but you mentioned it, so we may as well get to it right now. Does Buck Pierce get enough credit with what he's done with this offense this year? Not a lot of people talk about it, but I mean, I thought just once again, he called an absolute masterpiece. We're seeing new wrinkles week after week. And, with the loss of Greg Ellingson, was able to really target Nick Dembski. Dalton Schoen was getting a ton of looks from the Calgary defense for obvious reasons, and establishing that run game. Obviously, we'll get to Brady Oliveira's status, but he was averaging 7.5 yards a carry. Augustine was 5. And to your point, when it came down to it, it was pretty obvious. You didn't need a genius to be scheduling the plays in those last 2 minutes, but the Bombers got it done. But I just think Buck Pierce continues to grow into an incredible OC, filling the big shoes that were left by Paul Appolice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a guy who to answer your question, does he get enough talk? Does he get enough respect? Could he probably get a bit more in the media? Yeah, maybe, probably. I mean, I know he's certainly respected amongst the scribes and what he's been able to do. I mean, in his first year taking over, he won he helped the Bombers win the Grey Cup. He's now helped them get to 10-1 this season. And so you look at what he's been able to do with the offense. And this wasn't a surprise. I mean, a lot of people knew Buck Pierce was, going to play in that position. Buck Pierce had already turned down a couple jobs in the past, including with Montreal and Gulp, Saskatchewan. So, for him to kind of do what he's doing, it's certainly impressive, but it's not all that surprising. Now, inside the locker room, yeah, that's he is not underrated, undervalued. He is incredibly respected amongst the players, not only for his ability to put together game plans and be creative, much like we saw with Paul Appolice, prior to that, who Buck obviously learned under for years, but he's just massively respected as a human being, his outlook on life, his approach to life, which coincides with his approach to football and getting the best out of his players. He's just a guy that, people would, cliche as it sounds, would run through a wall for. And that I would argue, as well as being able to game plan and whatever, is the most important aspect of being a head coach. And I think, what the reality here is, how long is Buck Pierce going to want to do what he's doing here in Winnipeg, especially if he, starts racking up championships, and how quickly will a team want to pick him up and make him a head coach? I don't know where he stands with that, or if he's certainly comfortable here, and I know Winnipeg would do everything they can to keep him here. But yeah, certainly a guy that, is maybe not gained as much headlines as maybe he deserves. When you look at guys like Zach Collaros, who have been, we talk about his 26-3 record as a starter, 27-3 record as a starter now. When we look at the O-line, when we look at just, a lot of the weapons on the offense, it's easy to overshadow, but it's the same story on defense. I mean, think about it. The most talk Richie Hall got, over the years was when everyone wanted him out of town, and so that was kind of when he dominated the headlines, and he's put together an incredible defense, particularly last season and again this year, as guys come in and out of the lineup, as injuries rack up. And, because of players like Adam Bighill, because of players like Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat, and the list goes on, the guys who have the headset on are usually, hiding, much like they are on the, up in the boxes, as they call the games.
Yeah, there's so many things to get to. Two players that really stood out for me last night. One, for obvious reasons, a ton of pressure on Mark Leggio coming into that game. And, the room for error is very low when you're playing a team that good in a close game. He obviously did what he had to do last night. And again, this is credit to Buck Pierce, but he allowed and created plays to get the ball into Nick Dembski's hands. And Dembski had one of his best games as a Bomber and was deadly every time the pigskin was in his mitts.
Well, and I think that's part of building your offense and identifying the pieces that you have. I mean, Greg McCrae, who again deserves a ton of credit for his ability to come into the lineup and play a significant role after Greg Ellington was injured earlier in the week. But it's just, he's a running back, who is being utilized as a receiver. Nick Dembski is a receiver who's being utilized in the run game. You have guys like Brady Oliveira who are able to, obviously do his role as a running back, but also catch out of the backfield. You have guys you just have a lot of guys who are, who become, big weapons. I mean, look at Dakota Prukop and what they did with him. They left him in on, first and I think it was not quite goal, but it was from the 14-yard line after a short yardage package, and he rewards them with a dart to Rashid Bailey.
What a great call that was! I just rewatched that, Hammer. I just rewatched that before we came on, and it was so obvious that when Prokop is in, they're so geared on the run, and you do that fake, get a little bit of space, and it was an easy 6. And that's just a great call by Buck and excellent execution in an opportunity that Dakota Prokop does not get very often to throw the football.
Well, and it's great too. If you would have caught this, I don't know if you would have or not, but I happened to catch this as this play was unfolding as the short yardage team comes on, and then you have Dakota Prukop kind of coming to the sidelines, and you have Zach Collaros about 20 feet onto the field, and I guess they would have got the call in there, and Zach's just like puts his hands up immediately and is just like, you're doing this or whatever, and then jogs off almost like he's cheering for him. And then one play later, they're in the end zone. And that's a big piece of the puzzle. I'll give credit to our buddy Darren Bombing. He wrote, he talked a lot about the value of a Dakota Prukop and what he brings to the short yardage package, and his ability to get more than just those, slamming his head through the line for 1 or 2 yards. He's a weapon on the side, and he's fast, right? And he's shifty. So, he certainly adds to it, but that's just been the identity of this team really for the last few seasons, in that, the creativity and the personnel, or the creativity is based on the personnel and finding the right players and finding, exactly what you need in your system, whether, and that's been the case whoever has been injured. So it's certainly a testament to Buck Pierce and his offense and the players themselves, but also to the scouting team for bringing in the right guys and giving them the weapons that they have at their disposal.
No doubt about it. So Leggio, bounce back game, and he needed it. And, I know there's some people that are all over Leggio. There's some others that are saying it's insane that people are all over him. I mean, the bottom line is that is a job where you can be perfect for 90% of the time, and if the 10% comes with the game on the line, people will be talking about it. And, I mean, he came in still needing to prove himself as a guy that they could count on week in and week out, and there was an obvious setback last week against Montreal. But he was money last night.
Look, I mean, he had a rough game in week 10. He had to sit with it for an entire bye week. He had to answer for questions after the game. He then had to answer questions immediately when he returned to practice this week rather. And then comes out. Now, was he spectacular? No. I mean, he was fine. But he was 1 for 1 in field goals, happened to be exactly at the 32-yard mark, the one he shanked, with no time remaining against the Alouettes. And then I think he kicked he was good on all 4 of his other 32-yard ones. So I think, maybe that's enough to believe that he'll hit a 32-yarder the next time around. But that's what he's got to do. And I mean, I'll just quote, Mike O'Shea after the game. They expected that from him. He expected that from himself, and he delivered. I mean, it's an answer back from a tough week. And I think, the fact that, we are talking about him now, but it's those games where we're not talking about him, where it really is what is really what you want out of your kicker. You don't want him to be the guy that everyone's talking about, because more often than not, it's not, Sergio Castillo was 5 for 5 in the Grey Cup. It's, kicker misses this one in a key moment or this one in a key moment. And that's been the case over the last couple or in games this year. And we've also seen Mark Leggio play very well in games this year. So, what you want to see from him is consistency. And so for him to answer back after a tough outing is certainly a positive mark. But we're going to, we're heading in, the Bombers are heading into enemy territory this next weekend for a big Labor Day clash against a hostile, Rough Riders crowd. So that's going to be another tough test. And, a lot of pressure on him, because we know even no matter what those records are between the two teams, more often than not, they're a close one, and the margin of error is probably going to be small. So you're going to need Mark Leggio to be as consistent as he was, maybe even more so than Thursday. And that's, again, what everyone expects from him, including his teammates and coaches and himself.
Hammer, I've got to ask you about post-game. There were a few significant injuries in the game. Demario Houston got knocked down and got injured on that first touchdown by Calgary. Patrice Rene carted off later on. And then Brady Oliveira spent the majority of the second half of the game on the sidelines. What do we know about the injury ward heading into Labor Day after last night's game?
Well, we didn't get much for injury updates post-game. That's not, as we know, that's not Mike O'Shea's, thing. But I will say this, Demario Houston, it's, from what I understand, it's not looking good. Usually when, you get that report, usually means at least out for the next week. We'll see what happens with him. We'll see what happens with him at practice if he's there. I'm guessing he won't be ready for this week's game, so I don't expect him to be at practice, but we'll have to take a wait and see approach. As for Brady, I think he was scheduled for an MRI today to get more results for whatever his injury is. Don't know exactly what that situation. Don't want to suggest an MRI is necessarily an indicator that he's going to be out or whatever. They're just trying to figure out maybe the issue. Sometimes when swelling is too much, and after the game, they wanted to reduce that so they can get a better look. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know if X-ray or MRI. Those are just to check out or figure out what the issue might be. And then I'm not 100% sure of Patrice Rene, but he was carted off the field. So I don't think that's great news, and a really unfortunate situation for him, because it was his first CFL game, and he was expected to, he was the backup essentially to Demario Houston, so, and hurt himself shortly after, so didn't get a chance to really show what he can bring before getting injured. So that's kind of it for that. Not a lot of great news, of course, and particularly when you add Greg Ellingson to the list, who was added to the 6th game earlier this week after pulling up lame and a non-contact injury. So, as troubling as it is, that's kind of life in the CFL. The Bombers have certainly been able to, wade through these issues. But I would expect, I think, if you look at, I would expect them, as these injuries continue to pile up, to really start looking to add new bodies. Of course, there's some guys that they have who have played backup roles and guys who are on the practice roster, but, they might find themselves in a situation here to really go after somebody, whether that's another receiver or whatever, right? You want to retool a little bit to go on another Grey Cup run. And as we know, this is a massive, massive one for the Bombers as they chase the 3rd straight.
Okay, listen, there's some really funny stuff coming out of the game last night as well, which we have to get to. Just before we do that, though, I do want to thank our friends at Vita Health for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. The folks at Vita Health are stocked with Winnipeg's best selection of local, organic, and natural groceries, supplements, and beauty products, all at great prices, with an amazingly knowledgeable staff trained on these products to help you get exactly what you need. And hey, if you're into organic produce, local grass-fed meats, and a great grab-and-go deli with Vita Market salads and sandwiches, this is the store for you. Empowering Manitobans for over 85 years to lead healthy lives, now with 7 Winnipeg locations. Visit Vita Health at any of their 7 spots, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and check out their fully shoppable online website at myvita.ca. You already know that Wallace & Wallace is the fencing leaders in town, but did you know that they're also one of the biggest garage door companies around and work with Clopay, the largest garage door manufacturer in the world? And hey, despite the supply chain issues we're dealing with right now, there's still time, about 4 weeks turnaround, to get a new garage door installed just in time for the chaos that comes after Labor Day, with the garage door going up and down nonstop with hockey practices, dance recitals, and the like of the busy bustle of getting back to school and, of course, back to work. And hey, a new garage door can also add up to 4% to the value of their home. With 161 styles of garage doors to choose from, there's a style that's right for you. Visit them online at wallacedoors.com. Give them a call or pop down and visit them in person at their showroom on Lawson Road. I'm looking forward to it. The pickup is happening next week. I'll actually wear my new F suit for a wedding next week. And guys, everyone needs at least one suit that fits and looks great. And if you're like me, that never mind suits, haven't worn many collared shirts for the last couple of years, might be time to step it up in the wardrobe department. And if you're doing that, the guys at F Apparel are waiting for you with custom suits for men starting at just $400 and a great summer special right now, 3 shirts for $210. Went through the measuring process and picking out styles and the patterns and whatnot. It was an absolute breeze, and got great help with the F staff. If you're in the market to up the wardrobe, pop down and see them, 190 Smith Street downtown, online at that's EPHapparel.com. And don't forget, if you're in a wedding party, 15% off for all the fellas if you get your suits over at F Apparel. And a big thanks to our gang over at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, already counting down the days to getting back there next year. If you're thinking about an amazing fly-in fishing option here in Manitoba, where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg, Aikens Lake is the spot for you. And as good as the fishing is, the hospitality is even better. Find out more online at aikenslake.com or hit them up online or on social at Aikens Lake as well. All right, Jeff Hamilton hanging out for the first while of the program. Rewucki coming up later on. We will talk a little NFL with Chris Meaney. For those of you that are wondering, I know we said we probably wouldn't do marbles this week with Remus away, but have no fear. Alex and Reem have been in deep consultations, and we will have a marble race later on. How could we not after a big win like that by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers? But Hammer, we've talked a lot about the game, and obviously we'll have a lot of fun going into the Labor Day game and the Banjo Bowl going forward, but a few things that stood out. Now, before we talk about the crowd and the wave and some of the things that came out of that, does anyone deserve a game ball more than the referee that got absolutely trucked on that Calgary touchdown and got up enough to get on his ass and signal touchdown? That was one of the great officiating moments I can remember in a decade.
Yeah, Ron Bars is his name, and he actually took to Twitter. And speaking of bombing, you can check it out on his Twitter. He posted it or quote tweeted it. He had the Undertaker gif where he was down and out and then rose half his body up and said that's how he felt. So I mean, certainly a light moment in the game to a certain degree. I love that you could hear people laughing in the press box. You could hear almost kind of people laughing and then cheering in the stands. I think players got a hoot of it, and certainly for him to kind of have this seamless moment indicating the touchdown was an awesome moment in a somewhat otherwise challenging game for the officials. It's they get a lot of heat for their calls, and I think you could look at a couple in that game as well and question a few. So for them to have a moment where people are actually cheering them on is a nice shift and change, I imagine, for the 3-down line officials week in and week out.
It was right in front of me. And, legitimately at the start, people are bummed that Calgary's got a touchdown. But, I mean, he got absolutely trucked. And there was some legitimate concern right at the start. And, of course, he's the guy that has to signal the touchdown. And, he does the rave from his ass, signals it. And very strangely, but it just goes to show, I think, the respect the fans had for what that ref did. They actually cheered the touchdown call, albeit on a visiting team's touchdown. And it just goes to show he definitely deserves a game ball, and that is going to be on the ref highlight reel for a long time. Now, I need to thank a few people right off the bat. Longtime listeners of this program know it's not that I don't hate the wave, but there's a time for everything, much like saying shutout, much like saying singing na 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 na. And listen, the Montreal game with the wave got that conversation going that much more, with it maybe being ill-timed. And some people maybe myself thinking that there was some karma involved in the missed Legio field goal. Now, I should give a shout out to Jim Matthewman, because it's obvious that I had a number of people talk to me about it at the game, just sort of laughing around. Oh, we're not going to do the wave tonight until the game's done. Well, there were some individuals that were trying to get this thing going. And I think that the pleas of myself and other fans have gone through. So Jim found a guy trying to start a premature wave in section 117. He's joking that potential ban material from the stadium. But he then came to 110 and tried to start the wave. And fans, including Jim, were yelling at him, but it had to be done. Stop the wave before the start. It's saying we may need official wave rules. He will volunteer to be on the wave committee. We've had some other tweets in it about that. But I have to admit that this was, again, a real party atmosphere. And when you get to 30,000, there's a lot of folks that maybe aren't as much into the game, frankly, as a lot of the other fans were. But the discretion of the fans not to get into that was a big, big moment. And lo and behold, the Bombers eke out the victory without the wave, and then people were waving and having a great time afterwards. The curse is still alive. The wave often undefeated, but last night, a big, big night for Winnipeg fans, waiting until the appropriate time to do it. And really, there wasn't much time because that game was so damn close.
I love how you're throwing it to me about the wave. Like, this is your thing. This is
you guys talk about that. Certainly,
like, I mean, I think it's hilarious.
In the press box when that's happening, I mean, does that catch the eyes of everyone up there? Is it as much as it does many of the fans in the stands when things are happening like that?
Yeah, of course. We do it too, right? We do the wave as well when it goes through. No, honestly, like I honestly like I honestly don't I don't notice it at all. I mean, the only time I notice it is when when you slap on your tinfoil hat and take to social media and rage a little bit, then kind of ease up a little bit, then rage a bit more about it. And I did catch on social media the tweet that had you added on, and how it was like I'm not going to go as far as to say I understand it, but I certainly enjoy the chaos that ensues from it, from my perch, either whether it's up in the press box or simply someone staring directly at my phone as people get into it and back and forth about the power, or in some cases the curse of the wave and doing it too premature.
Well, as I said, it all worked out. That was the way it was supposed to happen last night. And all in all, just a perfect night at IG Field. Another beautiful night. And the crowd itself, and we sort of touched on this right off the bat. Do you like the wave? Thank you, Alex. Get that in. It was these games have really turned into the place to be on game night. And I kind of mentioned this before. I mean, if you were, there's a lot of like 19, 20, 21-year-olds that honestly have probably spent the last couple years for the most part at home. I mean, the social relationships of young people right now are so much more online, and the pandemic absolutely just exacerbated that even more. But man, to see the young people in and around having a good time is obviously huge for the organization. That's exactly what they need, I think, going forward. And there's no healthier franchise right now in the Canadian Football League. But there's nothing that cracks me up more than the collection of jerseys we see at these games. Now, football's a little different. Football's a little different because we know like sometimes guys are here for a year and they're out. Guys play a couple games, they're injured and they're out. And, you see a ton of Big Hills, Willie Jeffersons, more and more Collaros right now. And I think a lot of players will sort of get a jersey that they plan on. They hope a guy's sticking around for a while. I sat behind a crew yesterday. It was a Ryan Dinwiddie, Baron Simpson, number 51. Remember him? How many games did he even play for us? One season, maybe? Julian Fioli Godino. But I'm going to show this.
Family members are off the back post game, handout.
Exactly, folks. And again, if you are
a season ticket holder gift,
if you're listening on the podcast, you may have to make a point of getting to the YouTube for what we're about to show you. But I do think that I have found maybe the most hilarious, egregious jersey foul in the entire Canadian Football League. If you look at this picture right here, there's WST, none other than Sean Gitch-Lishka with the incredible Brockbusters t-shirt. You want to talk about old school. After the game, in and around the bus area with a lady wearing a Blue Bombers jersey, number 69, with the name bar, inches count. I'm rarely speechless, Jeff, but I was literally speechless watching this. And the first thing I had to do was get my camera to commemorate this incredible moment of jersey fouldom.
My takeaway from this jersey, which is, I think, whether like those people who show up, whether it's like a Bombers jersey or they get their own jersey and they decide, you know what, I'm going to get 69 on my thing. It's just, they're a certain breed of people. I think we got to appreciate them for who they are and their sacrifice and their willingness to go out in public in it and all that stuff. But my takeaway from this one particularly is, it's a game of inches, whether it's in the bedroom or on the football field. So figure it out and do the best with what you got and have fun. That would be my takeaway.
I swear to God, I just laughed for about 10 minutes after seeing this. And I'm not going to
wrap up.
Generally, like, this is a middle-aged or older woman too. Like, it was a big crew, big family, a bunch of jerseys, regular ones. And then all of a sudden in the middle of it, 69 inches count. And anyways, a great football reference. We all remember Al Pacino, Any Given Sunday. Football is a game of inches.
Absolutely.
And but the best thing, I was also thinking about this. Can you imagine, and the folks at the Bomber store or Royal or wherever you're getting your jerseys, when you're getting these customized, the order, like, all right, here's another one. It's a woman's medium, woman's large. Geez, we're going with 69. All right. What's the name bar? Oh, we're going to go with inches count.
Yeah. Well, you know how it is. I think I've seen one that had a 68 and then the name bar said, I'll owe you one. So, they're out there. So, people's creativity is, I think it'd be awesome to, someone who's worked at a like you said, whether it's Royal Sports or wherever, custom jersey place, what comes across their, proverbial desk to get things done, and how many howls, or if they take account or have a list of, their favorite ridiculous jersey requests. So, shout out to Inches Count. It's sure she's having she's creating a lot of attention, and is happy with her jersey choice as we sit here on Winnipeg Sports Talk, breaking down her choice of jersey.
It was an absolute showstopper last night, and I'll put this out to the WST crew. I've got a number of photos, but if you were at Bomber games or Jet games for that matter, let's put together crowdsource the best photos of ridiculous jerseys at these games. I did take a picture of a girl actually wearing a 69 with the name bar standing 69 at a Jet game before, and I think Barstool ripped it off, and it got about 200,000 likes or whatever on Instagram or something like that.
There you go.
But they're out there. We'll come together with an incredible collection of what Winnipeg fans are all about.
Who says we don't have fun? Who says we don't have fun in our jobs, right?
No doubt about it. Hey, listen, before we go, and thanks again. This has been so much fun with a little longer segment to kind of chop up, have some fun, and obviously talk about the big game last night. You mentioned Labor Day is just around the corner. I want to ask you about the Saskatchewan BC game. Obviously, no Nathan Rourke has sort of changed so much about BC, Michael O'Connor, but interesting, the bookies still feeling pretty good about BC as the better team, even without the quarterback. What do you make of where the Riders are at going into this game? And, do you think that BC continues to roll even without their superstar QB on the shelf?
Well, isn't that the number one question heading into this game and really this weekend of games? It's, the Nathan Rourke going down shocked the league and certainly is a horrible situation for the 3-down game. But, Michael O'Connor, another Canadian, I want to say nothing like Nathan Rourke, but pretty much nothing like Nathan Rourke. A big-bodied player, a pocket passer, has said this week in interviews, don't expect me to be Nathan Rourke. And I think that, that's, a Dr. Obvious statement, but it's also important to hammer down the fact that I don't think Michael Connor is going to be, doing some of the things we saw Nathan Rourke do, particularly in the ground game, whether that's extending plays with his legs or taking down or taking off upfield. It will be interesting. It's hard to, because I think a lot of people have the same kind of thought process you alluded to, Huss, and that is Saskatchewan that bad that they are going to potentially lose against a BC team that doesn't have their number one star quarterback? Maybe the Riders have been an absolute train wreck. This season, whether it's their penalties, whether it's their discipline off the field, whether it's their discipline on the field. Garrett Marino is just, we don't need to get into that. That could be a whole segment of itself, but it's just, it's a bit of a train wreck. But I'm not surprised by the odds either, because if you look at Saskatchewan, they don't have Duke Williams. They're not, Kyron Moore is a game time decision. They're not getting Shaq Evans back. They've been kind of decimated, and injuries on both sides of the ball. Their O-line's an absolute train wreck, and therefore, Cody Fajardo is injured too, but playing through it. It's just kind of crazy to think of all the stuff that's going on with Saskatchewan. And to be honest with you, I don't think Cody Fajardo starts this game if the Riders aren't hosting the Grey Cup this season, because the last thing a team wants in a Grey Cup hosting year is to bench their number one quarterback, pretty much midway through the season. So, they're saying all the right things about him. They're saying they're, putting their full trust behind him. He's our number one guy. All these things that, clearly Fajardo needs to hear because it's a bit of a mess over there. So I'm not surprised that they're underdogs, but it will be fascinating because Saskatchewan can't really continue to fall off here. I mean, at 5-5, yeah, they got a hold of the that fourth spot, but they're still they go down to 5-6, and they're within striking distance of the lowly East. So not earning that potential crossover, because I think we're at that situation right now with them, is that's probably the most likely position they're going to be in, unless BC falls off a cliff with Nathan Rourke out of the lineup, which I'm not saying is impossible. But even at 9-1 versus 5-5, I mean that's a tough hole to get, and they've already wrapped up the season series. So it's been tough sledding for Saskatchewan. I certainly don't feel sorry for them, but at the same time, we'll see what happens here. They do have an opportunity with the Rourke-less BC Lions team to gain some momentum. And if they can't get it done, even without the people they have in the lineup, it just feels like it's just going to be another long season for a team that I think had a lot of hopes heading into the end of the year.
Well, I still love the what you teased earlier this year on Winnipeg Sports Talk, the potential of the Riders being the crossover team, going through the East and being in the visitors' locker room at Mosaic Field, playing against the Bombers. And the Bombers literally have the first everything at Mosaic Field: preseason win, regular season win, playoff win. The only thing that's still left to go is the Grey Cup win. So I
think they had the first Labor Day win, or did they win the first Labor Day game there? Or did they lose that one?
I believe they did.
I don't know. Let's just we don't need to be right. We just both have to say the same thing. So it's we'll see. Maybe they won. Well, I'm not sure.
Hey, one more thing. Just we're going to finish off, ironically, with probably the worst game on the docket this week: Edmonton hosting Ottawa. Edmonton hasn't won in years at home, literally.
Sorry, I just woke up.
And they've got the Ottawa Redblacks, who are coming off, just an absolute embarrassment to the hands of Edmonton at home. What are you hearing about Ottawa right now and Paul LaPolice? I mean, listen, he's got a lot of fans here. I'm certainly one of them. When you look at the season they had last year, now with the new general manager that didn't hire him and one win on the season, I wonder how hot his seat is right now, Jeff.
Yeah, it was hot heading into the season after a 3-11 campaign in 2021. It's on fire right now. So, I feel sorry for Paul LaPolice, which is never a good thing to feel for a coach. because it usually means, not great things are coming. If you look at the season, if you look at their record at 1-9 or whatever it is right now, it's hard. It's 1 and something, maybe 8. But they're a team that has lost some pretty close games. Has been in games against Winnipeg. Both of those games to start the season, they were in their game against BC, but couldn't get it done. And so they do have some close games. Obviously, they lost Jeremiah Masoli, which is a massive blow to a team that was already probably going to deal with some growing pains, even though they had a significant roster overhaul that upgraded in a lot of different positions. To lose, Jeremiah Masoli as early as they did was certainly tough, even though he didn't, orchestrate a win over his stretch. But at the same time, it's professional football. I mean, this is a tough situation for Ottawa. They've lost 19 of their last 20 home games. You have the Mark Goody, the president of the ownership group, Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, coming off on social media after their most recent loss to say that the results are unacceptable and to urge fans to remain faithful through this dire stretch. So, I mean, where does Paul LaPolice's future lie with the Ottawa Redblacks? What I'm being told is it's too difficult. It's too difficult of a move to fire him right now, or to go in a different direction, because he's also the offensive coordinator. So unless you're bringing in a guy who can do both of those jobs and right away, you're not going to make like a Bob Dice or Mike Benavides the head coach, and then them have to deal with it and then figure out who's going to call the offense. It's just too much of too many moving parts for that team to succeed down the stretch. And the reality is, as bad as their record is, they're somehow not like still within an opportunity to catch second place in the East. So it's not going to be an easy task. And if you look at their record right now, there really is nothing to suggest that they're going to make ground in a little bit. But I almost feel like a coaching change at this point in time would almost derail the entire season. And although it might appease some of the fans, those comments are certainly getting louder and louder by the week. I don't know if it does much for the immediate success of the team, even though they haven't been all that much successful under LaPolice right now.
Yeah, no doubt. Hammer, listen, thanks so much. This is great. I'll look forward to catching up with you next week. Good luck on the garage sale circuit tomorrow. I mean, maybe we'll be paying attention to your Twitter feed at Jeff K. Hamilton or on Insta with some great buys. And I'll ask you about it next week coming out of the weekend. Thanks so much for doing this.
Hey, well, you know what? I certainly appreciate it. I'm it's always awesome to come in. I don't know if I'll be garage sailing actually this Saturday. I got a wedding. My good friend Tim Ringland's getting married to his beautiful bride Taylor Stiers, so bride to be. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get out in the waters early on, but big events have never prevented that. But we'll see. If you see me out on the circuit, say hi. But I might be skipping this one this weekend. But not many over the summer that I do.
Hopefully I will see you on the circuit, if you will. Have a great weekend. I'll look forward to catching with you next week. There's Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press.
Thanks,
really nice of him to jump in and hang out for the better part of the first hour here on WST. Chris Meaney still to come, and Brandon Rewicki is ready to go. Quick hydration break. Shout out to Ken Weeb. I'm not sure whether he won his match at the Tamarack, although I'm sure if he did, it'll be on Twitter immediately after he wins his 18th hole. Of course, Culligan Water is the experts in the water business for over 65 years with softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems and drinking water systems, and citywide water delivery services, and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Pop down and see him at 1200 Sargent Avenue, 694-5180, or find out everything Culligan can do for you and your family at drinkculligan.com. Well, we spent quite a bit of time talking about some interesting jerseys at the game last night. And if you would like to go get a number 69 inches count jersey, or maybe your favorite player, Royal Sports is the spot to do that. They do have legit Bomber jerseys like Willie Jefferson, Zach Collaros, Adam Bighill, and the new third jersey. But when it comes to licensed merchandise, Royal is the spot, whether you want something customized or of your favorite player. And it's not just Bombers and Jets gear. NFL merch coming in by the day with the season just around the corner. Not to mention with hockey season now, new stock daily, getting ready to drop the puck as Royal is the undisputed, undefeated heavyweight kings of hockey for over 35 years here in Winnipeg. Pop down and see them at 750 Pembina Highway and follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And keep your eyes out for another big tent sale at Royal coming up in early September. And hey, no Bombers tonight. They're already in the books for the weekend and, enjoying another big win. Great game tonight, though, out east. Hopefully it'll be a great game. Toronto and Hamilton. If you want to get out and watch the Jays, the golf this weekend, and more, no better place to do that than your local Boston Pizza. Check out their happy hour specials from 3 to 6 and 9 to 12 daily, and their great summer menu, including pizza flights, are back. And, of course, if you're staying home, check out their game day deals and order online at bostonpizza.com. And a quick update for you, keeping an eye on it, Brooke Henderson out at the Canadian Women's Open in her hometown of Ottawa. Brooks 4 under par for her round today, 6 under, tied for 7th right now, but still 6 back of the leader, and are on of Korea. Of course, Breezy Bend, our great golf sponsor. If you're looking for a great long-term spot for you and your family at one of Winnipeg's top private courses, check them out online at breezybend.ca or give our friend Corey Johnson a call. And of course, big weekend next weekend. Speaking of women's golf, the Canadian Mid-Am and Seniors Championship is at Breezy Bend. Hoping to get out there on Monday and actually do the show from Breezy to kick off the week. All right, let's get Rewucki in here. Lots to get to. Not really much hockey to get to because it has been an incredibly quiet week unless we want to talk about Phil Kessel. But Rewucki, I know you watched that game last night. How about those Bombers? What a classic last night. These games between the Bombers and Calgary have been so good this year, but great teams find a way to win. Probably should have had the win last week against Montreal. Didn't give the ball back last night, and Bombers are 10-1.
Yeah, what's funny about it is you said they're great teams find a way to win. I never really had a doubt that they were going to find a way to win that game, and it's still, I know, like we're in the midst of a potential three-peat here, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the fact that the Bombers are like the new Stampeders, right? Where, like, how many times in years past would Calgary, with whether it was Bo Levi or a backup QB, come in there and find a way to get the winning drive and break Bombers' hearts there, right? Like, it's Winnipeg that when the fourth quarter comes around, they rip the heart out of their opposition. I love it. I can't get enough of it. Where was this the first 30 years of my life?
Well, and honestly, I mean, you mentioned the first 30 years. I mean, I pinch myself every time I'm at the park right now at these games. I mean, 30,000 last night, an electric atmosphere, a crowd that really does help its team in important situations. And, for an organization that was so far down in the dumps not too long ago, to see the way this is turned around, it was almost inconceivable that we'd be in the position, certainly like both with the hockey team and the football team, but here we are right now. And they are the standard right now and the envy of everyone else in 3-down football around the league.
Oh, and look, this might sound like hyperbole to some and maybe a bit of a Winnipeg bias there, but this is one of the better run organizations in pro sports right now. Like, sure, it's not at the scale of, name however many teams down south or anything like that, but it's just wild how since, Kyle Walters has come in charge here and Wade Miller and Mike O'Shea, the Canadian Mafia, they've just completely turned this team around that was, kind of a sad sack bunch into like the premier team in their league. I love it. I can't get enough of it. And it's, you almost wonder when it's going to end at this point, because they're by far the biggest favorites in the league to, never mind win the West, but go back and win the Grey Cup this year. But then you have, the next best player in the CFL go down with an injury. You wonder if the Bombers pull it off this year, like what's holding them back from making it 4 in a row next year, right? Like it's funny. It's hard not to get ahead of yourselves here, but I guess just because it's been so long, I'm just enjoying every single bit of the ride. And yeah, that's just kind of the thing that stands out the most to me is just how, for years you would know they would find a way to lose games. And now it's like, no matter what's going to happen, they're going to find a way to win it.
Well, especially against Calgary. I mean, that is an organization that absolutely owned the Bombers for the better part of a decade. I think Hammer said that they were 18-2 in the 20 games before Zach Collaros was acquired. And one of those games was a game where Calgary rested everyone because they were already set to go to the playoffs and the Bombers weren't. So, you're in a situation right now where, I mean, it really has turned around. I will say this about Calgary, though, in these games. Like, don't be fooled by the 3-0 record this year because this team is very close. I mean, they're almost due to win one of these games. And I'll say this, if it does end up that the Bombers are hosting the Calgary Stampeders and Jake Maier, who's had 2 great games at IG Field so far, it'll be an incredible test, I think, in the West. And the Calgary Stampeders feel that they can beat the Bombers. They just haven't been able to do it. And, assuming the Bombers can get first place, and we'll see what happens with BC over the next little while, a Calgary team coming in with something to prove in November, I still think the Bombers would be the favorite, and they should win that football game. But listen, if these 3 games we've seen between these teams are any indication, that one is going to be a hell of a test for the Bombers if they want to get to the big game in Regina.
Yeah, I mean, 51-49 favored. You know what I mean? Like, the Bombers could just as easily be 0-3 as they are 3-0 against Calgary. So that, I don't want any part of the Stamps of the playoffs. I mean, we got lucky a few years ago when the Bombers found a way to go into Calgary and win on route to the first cup. I don't want to push my luck anymore. It's funny too watching the game, and it's easy for me to say on my couch watching it, but Maier was just dialed in, right? Like he was pinpointed all over the place, but my God, like it's like watching Tom Brady when Tom Brady throws 1,000 like dump downs. He doesn't throw a single pass 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and he ends up with like 400 yards passing. It was like, at some point, could somebody please cover something within 5 yards? Because he just was not looking to throw the ball down the field at all. So I do wonder, if it ends up being Maier in a game sometime later in the year, if Richie Hull changes things up a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't. To me, the record is basically useless because, I mean, what was the margin of victory in the series? Like under 10 points through all 3 games. So yeah, let's not tangle with Calgary in October or November, please.
It's so funny because, I mean, when you sweep a team, you should feel incredibly confident. And I think the Bombers are confident against anyone, but I guess I'm just saying, don't count out the Calgary Stampeders, especially as you mentioned with the way Jake Maier looked. How soon are we going to hear reports of Bo Levi Mitchell wanting to trade out of Calgary because he's not going to get on the field? This was overdue, I think. And to be honest, we saw Dave Dickenson after game 1 of the season maybe show his hand a little bit that he had an incredible amount of confidence in Jake Maier. Certainly, Bo Levi Mitchell deserved the starts going forward, but at this point, it's pretty hard to imagine them going a different way unless he has a major fall off in production. But this guy almost set a CFL record, was 6 yards short of 300 in the air, would have been his first 4 starts, all going over 300 yards. So Calgary somehow just does it. They find these quarterbacks, and they've got the next one there. And I think we'll be seeing a lot of Jake Maier in games between the Bombers and Stamps in years to come.
So annoying. It's sickening. It's repulsive that Calgary just continues to churn out star after star. But yeah, I mean, I guess you wouldn't do it unless somebody blew you away with an offer. But if I'm Bo Levi Mitchell and I'm watching, Maier toss the pill all over the place, yeah, I'm going to probably want to trade out somewhere soon because I'm not going to be playing anytime soon. So I mean, that's something to watch there. But it kind of reminds me a little bit. I know it's not the perfect example, but like when the Bombers had Matt Nichols at quarterback, then they make the trade for Zach Collaros, and you see like the stark difference, and you understand why the move was made, right? Like, I mean, Bo Levi's a Hall of Famer, and I don't know if it's injury or something's going on with him right now, but he's not the guy that he was 5 years ago. And you could argue that this was a few games overdue for a change to be made here, and you wonder what Bo Levi's future is going to be, and what potential teams could be a landing spot for him.
Brandon Rewicki's with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. We have basically, not surprisingly, talked about the Bombers almost exclusively since the start of the program. Part of it is the fact that there's another thrilling win in the team's first place and 10-1. The other part of it is that there is absolutely nothing reportedly to talk about in Jetsville. I mean, it seems like we've had this same conversation for the last couple of weeks. And, like I said with Ken yesterday, I'm stunned that we're at this point where we still don't have a lot of clarity on really where the direction is going, if they're going to be able to make on the move on the blue line, if there will be help going forward. And Brandon, I still think it's unlikely that we won't see some sort of tweak to the roster before we get to at least opening day of the regular season. But the longer we get, I mean, are we going to probably come into training camp with Rick Bowness kind of taking over the group that we have right now, and potentially maybe a move depending on rosters in and around the league closer to the season, or will something happen sooner? I mean, where are you at on this? We know where you're at because we put out your takes the other day on the Instagram. I don't know if you saw that. Some good stuff, but the silence is deafening right now for the Jets. And certainly, I mean, I kind of joke about the impatience earlier on in the month of August, like, hey guys, no one gives out the Stanley Cup banner in the first week of August. Well, we're just about the first week of September, and training camps are going to start right away.
Yeah, I only use Instagram to find out the latest sandwich special at King and Ban and to watch funny golf videos. So I might have missed the WST Instagram talk.
Yeah,
there,
and to follow hotties too.
Yeah, yeah, no. It's just a food account.
The engine of Instagram and social media.
But yeah, I mean, they don't hand out the cup in August, but I mean, you could also eliminate a bunch of teams in August and September based on what they did the past couple of months and what they're going to look like going into the season. I guess all you could really do at this point is, what has Chevy done in the past in these weeks and months leading up to training camp? And the answer is he's never made a move before. And I know it's not the exact same situation, but why would we expect something different to happen now? I think this is the team we're going to head into game one of the regular season with, and that's a major disappointment, man. I don't get it. I can't understand it. Other teams have been put in more difficult spots than the Winnipeg Jets, and they found a way to at least maybe not even necessarily improve themselves, but at least shuffle the deck, because doing the same thing over and over again is obviously the definition of insanity, all that stuff. But I think we're heading into training camp with the same group from last year. I think we're going to see one or two young defensemen shuffled off to the minors to avoid losing somebody on waivers. And I think a lot of fans are going to rightfully be pissed off.
If that happens, and you would understand the logic behind it because you don't want to lose assets for nothing. But I do have a fear, especially with a player like Ville Heinola, that if he's shipped off to the Moose again, not because he's not ready to play, not because he didn't have a good camp. I mean, like, basically because of numbers and because he's waiver exempt. I really do worry and wonder about what that does to the psyche and the attitude of a player like that trying to be a professional, but seems to, have a glass ceiling above his head. I'm not saying it will happen for sure. I certainly hope it doesn't. But if they go down that road, I wonder what the long-term effects on him and maybe some other prospects in the team watching that happen.
And that's completely fair. And, specifically in Heinola's case, and I talked about this in my last episode on Tuesday, I really wonder at this point, if you're the Jets organization and if you truly believe he's the fourth, fifth, maybe sixth best left-handed defenseman in your organization, are you not better at that point in terms of just shipping him off and then using him as a piece in a trade package to maybe turn the quantity that you have on the blue line into quality, right? Like it does nobody any good at that point. It's not even necessarily saying that he's a bad player, but it's literally a lose-lose for everybody. Like nobody wins in that scenario. And it's not, hand him a second pair job and it's Ville Heinola's team and away he goes, but at some point you invest so much into a guy that you'd like to give him more of a chance than what he's been given right now. And if you don't have a spot for him, then find him a spot somewhere else. And that's kind of where I'm leaning towards now. The problem, though, is, who is that guy out there, right? Like if you're looking to go big game hunting, who's the defenseman that's available at this point in the offseason? And the answer is probably nobody. So
to be honest, defense, they've got so many defensemen. I mean, I've been saying this for a long time. I mean, the most logical move when I look at the Jets situation right now is moving one of the defensemen. Pick a guy. I mean, listen, you're not trading Josh Morrissey for sure. But I mean, beyond that, if you've got a taker for one of your defensemen that can open up a spot for a Heinola, for a Dylan Sandberg, who's certainly acquitted himself well, and I would imagine is in the plans in the top 6. But to get a forward, I mean, you look at the Jets depth chart right now, there's tons of defense, and we've talking about moving some of the cap distribution from the blue line to the forward group for, basically dating back to last season. And that is why, I mean, listen, I know we're all impatient right now. Training camp is still a ways away. I do think that we are in a unique time right now where cap space is so valuable in the National Hockey League with this flat cap. And you would think that Kevin Cheveldayoff does have some options because, Brandon, I mean, we can't ignore that about a third of the league right now has to make some sort of move to be cap compliant. And that does make a general manager like Kevin Cheveldayoff hold some cards. I guess the big question is how you utilize that. Do you do it now? Do you do it later? But for a team that has some obvious needs, I would make the case that the sooner the better for utilizing some of that and changing up the mix. Otherwise, we're having these same conversations about a big logjam on the blue line and wondering who's going to contribute in the bottom 6 if you maybe can't add another player or two to the forward group.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with that, though, is, I mean, one, there's teams out there that have a lot more cap space than the Jets do and a lot more positions available. And if you're a team, like, it's a lot easier to make a move with, say, an Anaheim and Arizona, the usual suspects than the Winnipeg Jets right now, because they do have cap space, but they're somewhat limited too in terms of how much they have and then how many roster spots are available. And the other part is, I don't think cap space is all that precious right now because pretty much every team in the NHL has their roster figured out. Like, there's one or two minor moves that need to be made with some teams, but for the most part, the clubs are all set. So the cap space really at this point, for me, when I look at what the Jets have, is only extremely valuable come the trade deadline. And that's great, and the Jets can certainly take advantage of it then, but that does not help you games 1 through 55, right? Like, that's a lot of the season that this team isn't going to be able to weaponize that in theory. So I don't know. I just haven't been a fan with really just the direction that this whole offseason has gone so far. To me, there were a few different areas they could have went, and I think fans would have been happy in a bunch of different directions, but just staying the course, man. There are some teams that struggle, either miss the playoffs or, make the playoffs and flounder, where you can look at them and go, you know what, staying the course is the right call there. They've got talent, they can get it done potentially. This is not the case with this team here, and that's why we're sitting here a few days before August comes to an end going, how in the world has it gotten to this point when it seemed like there was 4 or 5, potentially 6 major offseason moves on the table?
Rick Bonus for Jack Adams. That is the success plan right now. He's going to go in and make all the difference. I mean, I think I said this yesterday on the show, but to make an analogy of this offseason, coming out of the year, I mean, certainly we heard from the Winnipeg Jets that the changes were expected to be made. And listen, I guess things can change. Circumstances change, and the Dubois thing, I think for sure has been a factor in this offseason. But it's sort of like the team is in a car and it came to a fork in the road and there were 2 directions to go. And we've just sort of put it in neutral and we're idling right now at that fork in the road and just waiting to stick it into gear and decide which way this team is going to go.
Yeah, they crash into the sign that says fork in the road, right? Like you got to do something here. And look, I honestly, at this point, I don't even buy the Dubois situation being an excuse for the team, because Matthew Tkachuk walked into Brad Treliving's office and said, trade me within a couple of days or I'm gone for nothing. And he turns that into the 3rd leading scorer and a number 1 defenseman within the span of a couple of days. Like, I'm just not buying that as an excuse anymore. There are so many excuses that you could point to and say, well, it's hard to make this move. It's hard to make that move. Yet certain teams consistently find a way to make these moves, and generally they find a way to make it be pretty successful. And I'm just kind of out of the excuses department. We've heard enough of that, to be honest. We've seen this iteration of the Winnipeg Jets for a long enough time to know that this isn't a Stanley Cup contender, barring Connor Hellebuck turning into Dominic Hasek, which is a slight possibility. But it just seemed ripe. It seemed like the perfect time to go all in or to go all out, and to just kind of hold your cards right now and we'll see how this plays out. Some teams that can work right now. I just think the Jets were maybe the bottom of the barrel in terms of teams who could have done that.
Hey, regarding Dubois, listen, I'm of the opinion that in 2 years, he won't be a Winnipeg Jet. I think it's pretty clear that that is where the smart money is right now. I'd love to see that change. Him have a great season, decided he's going to stay, and I guess that's always a possibility. But for the sake of this argument, let's assume that at some point the Jets are going to have to move on Pierre-Luc Dubois. From your perspective, Brandon, when's the best time to do that? And obviously team performance. I mean, if you're a first place team going into the trade deadline, probably doesn't make a lot of sense to trade him. But big picture right now, because this is more than just a player. This is the asset you got back for Patrik Laine, who, of course, has now signed his 4-year extension in Columbus. And I think there's more pressure for them to get this right than any other deal because of, how this will be tied back to by fans that probably are still bent about the trade in the first place. I mean, where do you fall into the best value, the best way to maximize that asset? Is there a particular time for that, or is it more finding the right partner and a right deal regardless of when it happens?
I think the best time is this upcoming trade deadline. I think that's where the Winnipeg Jets would be able to leverage the most value out of it. That's then followed by before the upcoming NHL draft. Those are, to me, the two big points as to where they could potentially make a move. I like the trade deadline, and it's also convenient too because, I mean, there's a few other big names on this roster everyone's aware of that have a year and a half at that point left on their contract. But essentially, you can kind of market it as, if Chevy's a good salesman, this is kind of a 2-for-1 offer here. You're getting a guy for 2 playoff runs, so I want value coming back that's equivalent to getting 2 seasons out of a guy. That's why I think the trade deadline. And then you have teams that are in the mix, depending on what happens with other clubs, things can kind of get pretty hectic in terms of the bidding wars getting completely out of control. That to me is what I kind of expect to happen. I mean, if I'm looking into the crystal ball, I think I said this maybe a few weeks ago on your show, but I kind of anticipate the Jets being somewhere 4th, 5th, 6th in the Central, 8th, 9th in the Western Conference. And if they're in that spot, to me, if Dubois is not going to commit to a long-term deal, then at that point, you throw him out there on the trade deadline, see what the bidding war becomes. And I think the Jets get a good enough offer that they make the move, they pull the trigger, and that's ultimately when his tenure comes to an end. It'd be fascinating to see if it's one of those, first-round pick, prospect, roster player type deals, or if the Jets can maybe shoot a little bit higher depending on what kind of a season Pierre-Luc Dubois has. But yeah, just looking at the situation as it is right now, I don't think we'll see Dubois as a Winnipeg Jet next season, and I wonder if we see Mark Scheifele as well as a Winnipeg Jet going into next season. Maybe that's before the draft as opposed to the deadline, but I do wonder if in 12 months' time, we're talking about a completely different group of a 1-2 center punch here in Winnipeg.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, we've talked about Scheifele quite a bit last year and into the offseason, and that seemingly is quieted down right now. But, I mean, nothing's changed the fact, which is where the argument of maybe considering trading him back in November came on this program, is that there's 2 years left on a guy that, if you're going to re-sign at the end of the deal, will be expensive. It'll be one of these legacy contracts that Kevin Cheveldayoff mentioned with a certain guy that wears a C right now. And if that is the case, I mean, we've talked a lot about, it's a 2-year window. It's not a 2-year window. I mean, it is a 1-year window, if that, because to your point, Brandon, they're going to need to figure out some of these things, whether these guys are going to be staying, whether they're going to be, and if you know that it's highly unlikely, I know you can't sign guys until July 1st going into the final year of their deal, but if you've got a pretty good inkling that that is not going to happen, to your point, the deadline of this season with the 2 playoff runs would certainly maximize the value for players, that it would be diminishing every day that goes on closer to unrestricted free agency.
Yeah, and this is why the pick one lane is the most persuasive argument to me, because look, if the Jets, I mean, if they're going to hold on to these guys until at least the trade deadline, you're kind of throwing his season away unless you go on this magical deep playoff run that I'm not sure a lot of us expect here. But if the Jets would have, say, for example, moved one, if not both of their centermen there, going into this season. Sure, it's a rebuilding year, but at least the reward at the end of the tunnel is a potential, let's say, top 5 pick in what seems to be a historically loaded draft. But as it stands right now, the Jets could be moving on one of those guys at the deadline and then looking at the 13th overall pick in the draft. So that it's moves like that I wish more teams would go all in one way or the other. Like either sell off some assets and try to reload in a year or two time, or go all in. Like try to win. It's fun to win. If you think you've got a talented team, which Chevy obviously does, then push some chips into the middle there and see if you can find a way to make it work. If you believe Rick Bowness is the guy and you think you've got a talented squad, then give him a little bit more support. But doing neither of those, I just don't think helps anybody. And that's, to me, I think where a lot of the frustration lies in the Winnipeg Jets fan base right now.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's an interesting comment. I just want to pull this out from the chat. And I think it was Yin Vivian that said, essentially, right now they're on the verge of having sort of fan apathy creep in, which is the biggest enemy to an organization that I think really needs to sort of turn the ship around in the right direction. And that's part of the reason why I am stunned that we haven't had more action this season in the off season, because this is much more than just putting together the roster that you think has the best chance to win every night in the National Hockey League. It was also about sort of re-energizing a fan base that did have apathy. And I can tell you right now, from just looking at the numbers of our show, the last 20 games of the season, there was, a little bit of a drop. People sort of tuned out because they knew where the season was headed. And then the second the season was over, normally you get into a kind of a slower time. It was the exact opposite with the biggest numbers we've had talking about the new head coach. I mean, the interest is there, but from a team, from a side of things where they really needed to do something to kind of inject some life and some excitement into this fan base, I think they really could have helped the guys selling tickets out a little bit, even to have, a move or two that would change things up a little bit. Because, as much as I think there's a lot of people saying, hey, and I see BAs in the chat, hey, this is a good team. They haven't really been a good team in like 3 years. And last year was incredibly disappointing considering the expectations that everyone had. And I've sort of joked that I guess we'll just give them a mulligan on it, but I'm not sure that really goes over well with the most important people. And those are the people that are buying tickets and season tickets to go see the Winnipeg Jets 41 times a year.
Yeah. Well, and, you don't make moves for the fan base. Like, I get that, but like, it's not even just a move for the fan base either. Like, I think there's some validity too, to injecting some new life and some new voices inside that locker room, right? Like, the fans are kind of hoping for a little bit more here, but I'm sure some of the players in the locker room wouldn't mind one or two new names coming in there and maybe changing the complexion and the dynamics of what's going on in there as well. So I'm completely on board there. And I would agree with you there. Like that, there is this, it's almost like we're living in 3 years, like in 2019 or something, because the Jets haven't been a good team for a while. And last year they weren't a good team. And they have not gotten better. Like you cannot make the argument they've gotten better this offseason, because they've lost Paul Stastny. Andrew Kopp was here for 60 games. They lost him. And then they downgraded at the backup goaltender position. Like there's more holes this year than there were last year. And last year was a bit of a disaster year, right? So I wonder what the end game here, I guess what really confuses me the most and what I'd love to know is just what's the plan? Like, what was Chevy's plan going into this offseason? Have they nailed the plan, or like what is the ultimate direction?
I don't think so.
Because I don't. You can't point to it, right? You can't point to moves or some moves that haven't been made and saying, "Hey, the team is trying to do this year." I don't know. It doesn't sound like Huss, and I don't know where it all went wrong and what made it all fall apart.
It's pretty hard to read the tea leaves because there isn't much to read over the course of the offseason. And listen, it'll be really interesting to hear. I mean, listen, I still think that we hopefully we'll see something happen that, will give a little bit of excitement going in and, presumably improve the roster going into the season. But come training camp, we'll hear from the new head coach and we'll certainly hear from the general manager. And I guess time will tell. Brandon, thanks so much for doing this. Have a great weekend and we'll hook up next week.
Sounds good, my man. We'll talk soon. Have a great weekend.
Right back at you. Check out Skates and Plates wherever you get podcasts. That is our guy, Brandon Rewicki. All right, we're going to shift over to a little bit of NFL talk. Your fantasy football drafts coming up, and our guy, Chris Meaney's jumping on in just a minute. Don't forget, Marbles is happening. I think we've just had an open entry all day, so if you want to get ahead of it, put in exclamation mark Marbles. We'll drop that in a few minutes after we chop it up with Chris Meaney. Just before we do that, big shout out to the Not AutoCorp gang. Got a chance to see Trevor and the boys out at the game last night. Lots happening at the dealership right now. If you are looking for a new whip, before you go anywhere, get on over to Waverly and McGillivray and talk to the experts at Not AutoCorp. An incredible array of vehicles in the dealership and on the lot. And if there's a particular make and model that you've got your heart set on, the experts at Not will source it, find it, and get it here to Winnipeg for you at the best possible price. Why not get into the car of your dreams at a great price with the help of the Not team, Not AutoCorp, Waverly, and McGillivray, and online at not.ca. Folks, the countdown is on. 6 days from the start of September. What? But most importantly, September 1st, our first ever sports trivia night over at Little Brown Jug. Man, it's going to be fun. If you have not got your tickets already, make sure you do. I've put. I'll try in a minute to throw the link in the YouTube chat. But certainly, you go to littlebrownjug.ca. They've got an Eventbrite link for it. Buy your ticket. It's essentially the cost of one beer, and you'll get a free beer when you show in. It's just more to make sure we've got our numbers. And we had a great response, right? I just mentioned it for the first time. So Thursday night, September 1st. Let's see the WST gang out there. I will be spending much of the weekend finishing up the questions, and I'll look forward to be your quiz master on Thursday at Little Brown Jug. Of course, the weekend's here. Nothing makes the weekend better than a 1919 or any of the great beers from Winnipeg's top local brewery, Little Brown Jug, William Avenue, and online at littlebrownjug.ca. By the way, link has been in the description as well of the last couple of shows. So if you want to check that out, just get on it. Make sure you're there. We'll see you there. Hey, weekend here. Great time to go grab a Blizzard as well. I'm partial to the incredible stack burgers that Nick and Nikki and the DQ folks are cranking out. But let's face it, the Kit Kat Blizzard, my personal favorite, the Reese's Pieces Cookie Dough Blizzard, are big hits of the summer. We're going to have some nice weather. Pop down and see Nick and Nikki. 4 locations, DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. And if you do need a cake for an upcoming event, hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. They'll get it for you, custom made for quick and easy pickup at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs. All right. Let's talk a little NFL for a minute before we get into the marbles and welcome in the man from Mean Streets, FTN Network's Chris Meaney. Meaney, what's up, man? It's great to have you on the program. How are you?
What's going on, Hustler? I'm all of a sudden very thirsty on a Friday, of course, for a cold one, and always looking for DQ Blizzard. It's my favorite. It's my go-to as well. The cookie cream, the cookie dough. Like, just give it to me. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to need to invent some sort of a beer blizzard, and we can do it at the same time.
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure that really would go together. Listen, we've had some great conversations on this show in the past, and folks, if you're not familiar with Chris, you can also check out Mean Streets on the Game Plus Network and everything he does over at FTN. We've talked a lot of hockey last year, a little baseball earlier on. But let's face it, for guys in your line of work, this might be the busiest time of the year as we get ready for fantasy drafts, for the start of DFS season, and for NFL kickoff. You got enough hours in the day for everything that you're cranking out right now?
Yeah, I think so. It certainly is a busy time of the year. As you know, you're covering all the sports here as well. I have to take a step back, of course, from the Canadian Football League at this time of the year with the NFL, and then training camps are going to open up here in the NHL. We'll just kind of, as soon as the NFL starts, kind of, obviously following the sport, but then turn our attention over to like some NHL previews and, futures and fantasy hockey stuff like that. But it's an exciting time of the year. Baseball playoffs just around the corner, bright lights of October. College football happening this weekend, and then before you know it, college basketball, NBA. So I love it. Just like you love what you do as well, and the support has been great for people hanging out during Mean Streets. And as we get so much closer to week 1 of the NFL season, is certainly an exciting time.
I almost fell off my chair today, dude, when I realized that this is week 0 of the college football season. I mean, there are going to be games this weekend that actually count. I'm like, what? And, I was just mentioning we're doing our sports trivia night at Little Brown Jug, and it's September 1st, and it seems so far off. That's next Thursday. So, I mean, we're less than 2 weeks from the kickoff of the season, and what a game to kick it off between the Bills and the Rams on Thursday, September 8th. Cannot wait for that. But let's talk some NFL right now. And I know the majority of folks are probably doing their drafts over the course of the next sort of 10 days. Next week is really a big draft week, as well as leading into the opener. But you've been all over this. You've been in tons of drafts. You've been following what's going on with where guys are getting picked. What have you noticed right now? I'll ask you this. In some years, it's all about the running back position and scarcity. That's changed over a bit. I mean, is there any trends right now you're seeing where it comes to positions or some risers and fallers of guys that maybe were off the radar a few weeks ago that everyone's clamoring about right now because of what's happened in training camp in the preseason?
Yeah, I think we can certainly start there with one of the buzziest players I think in the NFL here is Dameon Pierce. And if you watched last night's Thursday night football game between the Texans and the 49ers, you saw Pierce start the game and finish the first drive with a touchdown. The offensive line was great last night for Houston, created some holes for him, but this is a kid who's really driven up draft boards. He was a 4th round pick by the Houston Texans. Nobody's really considering him. They were talking about Breece Hall with the Jets. They're talking about Kenneth Walker with Seattle, and a couple other running backs as well. But Dameon Pierce is somebody that I've really liked. A couple months ago, Hustler, you were able to get him in the 10th, in the 11th round, I think because people are a little uncertain about him. And next to his name on draft day, when you're drafting with your buddies, you see Dameon Pierce - Houston. Houston, the Texans, it's going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Why would I want a running back on that team? They're not going to score a lot of points. They're not going to live inside the red zone. But I think the offense is going to be okay, and the offensive line is all right. The bottom line is he's in a really good spot. These rookie running backs, it really is about opportunity and volume, and he's got one right away. He's on a team with a couple of veteran backs and Marlon Mack, who played behind Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor in Indy. He's a couple years removed from a really good campaign. It's nice to see him back in the NFL after rupturing his Achilles a couple years ago, and then Rex Burkhead's on that squad. So it's very telling with the Texans. In the second preseason game, they didn't even suit him up. I mean, rookies are playing for the most part, especially running backs. You got to learn the playbook. You got to see if you can pass protect. It's a big learning curve from college into the NFL. And to me, it was very telling that they didn't play him at all in week 2 of the preseason. It just says that they didn't want to get him hurt. They had seen enough. And then yesterday they gave him some touches. So he's a guy that's really climbed draft boards. For example, I said that I got him in round 10 or 11, I think, in our first FTN mock a couple months ago. I saw him yesterday in a high stakes leagues over at NFFC. People are putting their hard-earned bucks, on the line, $350 entry. He went as RB 19 in that draft. It's a little high, but he's somebody, if you're drafting on Yahoo, ESPN, Fantrax, this weekend, he's going to be buried down in terms of ADP. He's going to be outside the top 40 at the running back position. I have him as a top 30 running back. So he's pretty trendy, but it's warranted. I think it's certainly worth a pick. Fantasy has changed over the years. It's been, people want to do different things like zero RB and, attack the running back position a little bit later on, or, attack it in the first couple of rounds. I'm kind of old school that way. I have a hard time finding running backs outside the top 25 that I really like. And you look across the league, there's a lot of committees. There's only a handful of running backs that are 3-down running backs in the NFL. Like, they're going to play first down, second down. They're not going to get taken off the field. In third down situations, of course, you have CMC, you have Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, and Derrick Henry. These are guys that are really going to stay on the field. There's some committees across the league in Green Bay, Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon. In Denver, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams. There's some really good committees across the league. If you're just new to fantasy football, I would attack the running back position early. And there's just so much depth at the wide receiver position. There really is. From the middle rounds, round 6 to 10, you can get plenty of stud wide receivers. And those running backs are hard to come by at that point in the draft.
Hey, speaking of running backs, and especially for folks that may be getting into it for the first year, I mean, you're on the clock in a regular snake draft, redraft league, and you got the number 1 pick, and you see one list that has Christian McCaffrey as number 1, another list that has Jonathan Taylor number 1. Who Who's your number one? And does it change from a PPR format where you get a point for every reception to a standard league that doesn't award that?
It's a great question. Taylor is my one. I think he's the safest player in fantasy football.
Yeah.
Christian McCaffrey has dealt with injuries in each of the past 2 seasons. I've heard people say, if you want to play safe, take Taylor. If you want to win, take CMC. It's not that simple. Like, you can still win leagues with Jonathan Taylor. He's arguably behind one of the best offensive lines in football. We know what the Colts want to do. They want to run the rock, and they run it really well with Jonathan Taylor. They have an upgrade at the quarterback position. They traded in Carson Wentz for Matt Ryan, who's a little bit more accurate, even though he is a little bit older at his point of his career. I think he can take them to another level. Christian McCaffrey's great. I mean, he's fantastic. If this guy's going to play 14 games, he probably will finish as RB1, but there honestly is some risk at that point. He's, if people watching and listening here have taken Christian McCaffrey, they may be thinking, no chance. I'm not going down that road again with CMC, because it has been a couple years in a row where he has burned you. And taking that first overall pick, second overall pick for a guy who's only going to play, a handful of games, it could kill you. And again, we're splitting hairs here. I have no issue if you want to draft CMC first overall, you want to take him second overall. He's my second overall pick. I think, you're getting a really good running back at 1 or 2. And then if you have pick 3 or 4, I would really look at the wide receivers. If Austin Eckler's not what you want on your team, you want to take another safer play, it would be Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp. These are 2 wide receivers that are very, very safe. But, other players, even in a full point PPR league, Christian McCaffrey, he finishes like 8th overall in terms of points per game. Derrick Henry, 18 catches last year, missed half the season, but he had 25 fantasy points per game. So I wouldn't just look overall. Even though it's a full point setting, I got to grab a pass catcher. You're still going to get 50 plus grabs out of Jonathan Taylor. You're still going to get, 50 plus grabs out of Austin Eckler, even though he's not going to run between the tackles as much as Jonathan Taylor. I don't think you can really go wrong, Hustler, with the number 1 overall pick, whatever way you want to go. But give me the younger back, the more durable back so far behind one of the best offensive lines in football. And to me, that's Jonathan Taylor.
Chris Meaney is our guest. Follow him on Twitter at Chris Meaney and check out all of his content over at FTN Network and FTN Bets. I'm really pumped to have you on just because I always love chatting, especially at this time of year with you. But I've been wanting to ask you about a tweet that you dropped last week that I found very, very interesting. And this has to do with the Washington Commanders. Still choked. I love WFT. I don't know why they changed their name. But anyways, I digress. Antonio Gibson's stock in drafts has been dropping like a stone. It sounds like potentially Brian Robinson Jr. could be the starter out of the gate. Thoughts on the backfield? And then tell us about what you'd said. I mean, I'll paraphrase, but you had said the more I watch Washington in the preseason, I think that they might be planning to use Antonio Gibson in a more Deebo Samuel style role. And Deebo Samuel was one of the biggest difference makers in fantasy last year. What to make of Washington, Robinson, and Antonio Gibson going into this season?
Yeah, it may be a bloody mess, honestly, for fantasy football. You also have J.D. McKissic on that squad, who is a couple years removed from 80 grabs, tied with Alvin Kamara. I think he has the 5th most catches among running backs since 2019. He's a really good pass catcher. And last year they used him in 3rd down situations and 2-minute drill. And he was close to signing a contract with the Buffalo Bills. And Washington said, no, we got to have this guy back. And, they brought him back. So I think he's going to continue to have a 3rd down role with Washington, a team that's going to be playing from behind quite often this season. And in a 2-minute drill, he's going to be the back that's on the field. Then the team went out and drafted, as you mentioned, Brian Robinson Jr., who's a big body back who could steal 1st and 2nd down touches from Antonio Gibson and goal line work from Antonio Gibson. I like Gibson as a player. It doesn't seem like Washington likes him as much as maybe other people like him. Like, he's a really good player. He's a wide receiver converted running back, so he can catch the ball out of the backfield. They just don't use him that way, which is really strange. In his latest preseason game, he caught a couple passes, but J.D. McKissic didn't play. So those catches, those targets probably go to J.D. McKissic. But when I watched that game, I did see them use him a little bit differently. And again, Deebo Samuel, wide receiver, could run the ball out of the backfield. Very, very good. And I think, Antonio Gibson has shown that he can do that. But a couple things have gotten him. He's been in trouble. He's kind of in the doghouse. Like, it's very telling with these organizations how they feel about certain players. Ron Rivera talked about how he's got, and I'm paraphrasing as well now, that he has a bit of a stutter step that gets him into trouble. He's had some issues fumbling last year and again this year, and now he's catching passes with, special teams, which is probably not something that's going to continue. Maybe he has that kind of role in the regular season, but he's still going to have a role with this team. But it's very crowded. A couple months ago, he was going as roughly running back 20. This morning, I did a draft, underdog best ball draft, where he fell to the 9th round, outside the top 35 of the running back position. At some point, it becomes a value, right? Even if he doesn't touch the ball 20 times, you're getting a running back we know that can touch the ball 20 times. And then if he can get back into, Ron Rivera's good side, then he'll get some touches. But I am concerned about him overall. I was concerned with him last year. It just didn't seem like the type of running back that could, really handle a full workload. Like, I'm talking 20 touches a game. He was battling through some injuries. He was very strong last year, and he was kind of touchdown dependent. But I do have some concerns overall with this Washington team. But yeah, you're right, Hustler. Like, watching that game kind of seemed like, hey, they lined him up wide and, they put him in the slot, maybe a couple carries out of the backfield. So if that's the kind of role that he has, maybe he's a little bit more efficient. Maybe he gets more confidence, holding on to the rock and things like that. But as of right now, I'd probably stay clear. I would, if you're in a full point PPR league, J.D. McKissic is a guy you can take in the last round. He's going to keep his role. And then if you wanted to, Brian Robinson's going outside the top 40, and he's a guy that could get some goal line work. But overall, it's going to be I think a long year in Washington. I don't think they're going to score a lot of points. I don't think they're going to move the ball.
Meaney, let's get to a listener question. Sean 37, what's up, Sean? Says, can you ask him about the top 5 rookies? I don't know if you want to list 5, but I mean, of the rookie class of this year, who are the most attractive from a fantasy perspective? And is it different if you're in a redraft league or if you're thinking long-term and you have the opportunity to keep these guys in a keeper dynasty format?
Yeah, I'll stick with running backs first, and I can share a couple wide receivers. But yeah, Breece Hall is going to be the first rookie running back off the board, roughly round 4 as the 18th to 20th running back off the board. Now the Jets certainly have some issues offensively. Zach Wilson's going to miss a bit of time. It looks like Joe Flacco is going to be the week 1 starter. I like their draft over the past couple of years, adding some pieces, but I wouldn't be shocked if that's a bit of a committee as well. Michael Carter's a guy that they drafted the year before, and he was inside the top 10 and forced missed tackles and rushing and receiving. He's a pretty good running back, and I think he's going to have at least a third down role for this team. Kenneth Walker is probably the second rookie running back off the board. I think that's a mistake. He's already dealing with a sports hernia injury. Rashad Penny's on the team. It's a very weak offensive line in Seattle. It's probably a bottom 5 team offensively. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if they were the worst team in football this year. And there's a lot of question marks at the quarterback play. I would rather have Dameon Pierce, who we kind of just talked about earlier in Houston, is not really dealing with any competition. Could potentially be like a 3-down back for the Texans. And the offensive line is a lot better than Seattle's. Another running back I would throw out that is pretty much free in fantasy drafts is Tyler Algier. Another guy that I don't think I was really thinking about on draft day where he would go. I think he was another 4th round pick, but in a great landing spot. Like, Cordell Patterson's on the team and he had a great year last year, but he's not a back that's really going to run between the tackles. They can line him up all over the field, and in the slot out wide is another guy that we've seen more as a wide receiver and a punt return guy, and all of a sudden he's carrying the rock between the tackles. But Tyler Algier's in a really good spot to get goal line work there and first and second down opportunities. So those are a couple backs I have no problem with the price tag on Breece Hall, and but Dameon Pierce, Tyler Algier, those are 2 running backs. I'll throw one more at you, and would be James Cook. James Cook out of Buffalo, brother of Dalvin, who plays for the Minnesota Vikings. The Bills are ready to win the Super Bowl. They're Super Bowl favorites. They're loaded on offense and defense. I think the only hole that they have on their squad would be a pass-catching running back. Now they have one. They tried to get McKissic, like I mentioned earlier. It didn't work out. Very telling, because they went out and drafted Cook in the 2nd round. So to spend that kind of pick, that he's going to be involved. He's a guy that can take a 5-yard screen, take it to the house. Josh Allen likes to call his own number. Certainly going to continue to do that inside the red zone, but James Cook is going to have a role with this team, and it's going to be a really good offensive team. Quickly, I'll throw a couple wide receivers at you as well. I think Chris Olave with the New Orleans Saints, Jameis Winston under center this year, no Sean Payton. It's going to be a different look in New Orleans this year for sure. And Jameis Winston's got some nice weapons. Last year we saw him. He was pretty productive. He's very efficient. It wasn't like Jameis from Tampa where he's dropping back, throwing the ball 50 times. You didn't know if it was going to be a pick
30-30 man.
or a touchdown. Yeah, no doubt. Last year he was like 14 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, throwing really to nobody. This year he's got Michael Thomas. I know he's dealing with some things, but if he can stay healthy, he's, added element. They bring in a veteran, Jarvis Landry, and Chris Olave at Ohio State. So I'm certainly on board with Chris Olave. I think Sky Moore as well. It may take some time for Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Travis Kelce, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling on the squad, but linked to Patrick Mahomes and West Coast offense, and Andy Reid has done wonders, over the course of his career, whether it's in Philly or it's, currently in KC. And just to get a guy like Sky Moore, they could use all over the field, some end arounds, deep targets down the field for Patrick Mahomes. So those are 2 wide receivers in Olave and Sky Moore that are certainly on my board. There's other guys that, were drafted earlier that I think, to your point, in dynasty leagues could be better long-term plays. Treylon Burks for Tennessee. It may take a little bit of time for him to get going. He's down the depth chart. There's been some reports at a camp that he's struggling with the playbook and, running wrong routes. These are things that I think he'll get over time. So if you're in a dynasty league, keeper only or rookie only draft, I wouldn't let him fall too far. I think he is going to be a fine player in the NFL. Same with Drake London. It may take some time for him in Atlanta. And then one more, George Pickens. There's a lot of talk. Who's going to be the quarterback in Pittsburgh? Big Ben is gone. I think it's going to be Mitch Trubisky week 1, but Kenny Pickett over time. Also got Mason Rudolph on the squad, but he's a big body, physical wide receiver that the Steelers haven't had since Hines Ward. He can block. He's like 6'2". He can go up and get it. And it just may take some time, right? You got Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson on the squad. Some of these rookies, it takes a little bit of time to get going, but I'd be patient with a guy like George Pickens, and I wouldn't let him fall too far either, in dynasty drafts.
Hey, what about Crowder in Detroit? Because he's coming off a pretty significant injury, and that's, I think, part of the reason why he maybe dropped to where he did as the 10th pick. But this is a guy with a real dynamic play set. Can you have any expectations for him this season, or is that a project?
Which Crowder? Which Crowder are you talking about?
Jamison. I think Jamison Crowder.
Jamison.
Alabama
receiver. Jameson Williams. Yes, to Detroit. My bad.
Screwing up his names to the Lions.
No, you're spot on. That, you know what? Good call. Because yes, he's going to miss some time. I think he may be a fade in redraft leagues. There's a couple ways that we could talk about him. Actually, he was one of my favorite wide receivers coming out of college. I mean, he's very much like Deshaun Jackson when Deshaun Jackson was like really explosive, his early years with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was like getting a 40-yard touchdown every single game. Jameson Williams did that with Alabama, quite often. I think Garrett Wilson is a really good wide receiver as well. It's just going to take some time, but they had a really nice 1-2 punch there. It looks like he's going to miss potentially the first 6 weeks. So it's tough to draft him and, get something from him in a redraft league. But if your league has IR spots, you could take him with your last pick and you could just plug him after your draft is over and put him on IR. And then you can just go and pick somebody up right away on the waiver wire. And I think that's a pretty good strategy. But if your league doesn't have an IR slot, it's really tough to hold him for 6 or 7 weeks, just on your bench. And if you have other injuries and you're going to want to drop somebody, I think you can get into a bit of a tough spot there. It's very crowded in Detroit. They surprisingly have one of the best offensive lines in football. I actually kind of like what's happening in Detroit. Jared Goff, maybe not the best real life quarterback, but he is set up to have some success this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown heading into year 2 was great in the slot last year. TJ Hawkinson is a really good tight end. They brought in DJ Chark. So they have some weapons. When Jameson is healthy, he may be on a pitch count. He's probably number 4 in terms of targets. He also got DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. And, when he was playing targets per game, he was number 1 in the NFL. He's going to be another great pass catcher this season. So I would consider him in redraft only if you could put him on IL. But dynasty leagues, he's going to go. He went 2nd overall in one of mine. So people like him, and they're willing to, and if you have a top pick in a dynasty league, depending on how your league works, you probably didn't have the best season. Maybe that was injuries and you want to rebuild. I think he makes for a good pick, right? You're not in it to win it this year with him, but this time next year, we're talking about him and his explosiveness and how great he can be in the NFL. Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up. He kind of just slipped my radar because he is hurt and he's not going to be ready week 1.
Well,
but man, he's going to be a heck of a player in
exactly.
the league.
Meaney, this has been awesome. And folks, this is just a taste of what you'll get from Chris daily at Mean Streets and everything else. Give people a quick plug for where they can find you and all of your content, because for a large portion of us, we can't get enough of this stuff at this time of year before our big draft day coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Mean Streets is free Monday to Friday at 12 Eastern. I tweet it out at Chris Meaney. It's also live on our FTN Network YouTube page. You can hang out and watch at 12, or you can watch the replays. We've been diving into everything. We've done every single team future. We're doing division futures. We've done every single team preview from a fantasy standpoint, from an NFL standpoint. We're now doing NFL futures, taking a look at every single future on every team, what the props books has for those certain players. And like I said, we'll be diving into the NHL. But that show is Monday to Friday. I also have a betting show with Eric Young, who is a professional wrestler, but also a fantasy football and fantasy hockey psycho. He loves all the sports. And that show will be on Tuesdays and Fridays at 11 Eastern in the morning. And on Tuesdays, we'll just be recapping the week, right? On Monday Night Football, taking a look at the waiver wire, trying to help you guys in your fantasy football leagues. And then on Fridays, we'll really dive into the betting market. We also have a MLB betting show over at FTN Network on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1:30 Eastern. A quick little fast pace, 25-minute show. We're just kind of giving some of our MLB picks for the day. But I appreciate the plug. I didn't get a chance to talk Courtland Sutton. Make Courtland Sutton a priority in your fantasy football drafts if you're drafting tonight or drafting this weekend. I really like the addition of Russell Wilson going to Denver. Exactly what Courtland Sutton needed. His touchdown prop is 5.5. I think that we'll see him surpass that number probably midway through the season if he can stay healthy.
Well, you are definitely a prop king. We'll take that under advisement and get straight over to CoolBet and maybe throw a little sprinkle down on it. Meaney, Let's do this again soon, pal. Thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Hustler. Have a good one, man. Thanks a lot.
You bet. At Chris Meaney on Twitter, and make sure you check out all Chris's comments, content over at FTN Bets. All right, gang. Friday afternoon, you know what that means. Now, Alex has had the entries open, I believe, for most of the afternoon. But right now, if you've been waiting for it, it's open. If you haven't already put in exclamation mark marbles, we'll get to some quick cool bet lines, and then we will drop them here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Before we do that, though, got to thank our friends at Princess Auto. Wow, what a scene at the Princess Auto tailgate zone yesterday. And I didn't realize this until just before halftime, but you can also get out there at halftime and enjoy beer specials and maybe a little bit more room than some of the crowds that might be in some of the areas of the stadium. Of course, Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the tailgate zone, and can't imagine what the scene is going to be like there before the Banjo Bowl coming up in a couple weeks. Of course, Princess Auto is the place where you'll find the best deals and the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. I'll be doing the show from Princess Auto with some very special guests next Thursday. Looking forward to that. Speaking of great times at the Bomber game last night, saw many of you enjoying a CC and Ginger, as well as our winners of the Jim Beam Social Passes got one free with their ticket. If you haven't had it already, what are you waiting for? It's good to go, pre-mixed, ready to drink in cans for you. 6 packs available at your local beer store. And of course, at Manitoba Liquor Marts, along with all the great Canadian Club products, as Canadian Club is the official sponsor of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And Monday, they're back at the track. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, live racing next week as the season continues for Assiniboia Downs. If you're thinking about making a reservation, taking care of getting in on that incredible prime rib buffet, you can give them a call at 885-3330. Make a reservation and get out to the track. Of course, if you're staying home, you can always watch the races on the Assiniboia Downs YouTube page and bet with myself and Remus over at hpibet.com. All right, last call for marbles, everybody. Last call for marbles. Alex, if you want to close the list, although if you can, I'm going to give you, Alex, back there, if you can add if you can add 4 more names to the list. We've got to put our guests in today. So Jeff Hamilton gets a marble. Brandon Rewicki gets a marble. Chris Meaney definitely gets a marble. And then I think it's only appropriate, considering the content earlier today in the program, that we give Inches Count a marble in today's race. So we'll get that set up. We'll add Inches Count, and our 3 guests, they'll get marbles today. And everyone else that is entered, again, last call, if you haven't already, quickly get it in there, ! marbles. And Alex, you can grab that up and get ready to go. And while you do that, I will get to our cool bet lines for the weekend heading in. Of course, Bombers and Stamps already done. Did get the Stamps covering last night. That was a tough number for the Bombers. Fell down to 5 or 4.5. But they did get the money line win. The Calgary Stampeders, though, covered the number. And this is really interesting. The Argos, who were 3-point favorites earlier this week, are now 1-point underdogs at home. Tons of money coming in on the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who are now 1-point favorites, and minus 111 on the money line. Argos now minus 1.5 on the money line. I took the Argos head-to-head with Dusty earlier on the lock shop. I would have loved to have waited and got them at +1 as opposed to -3. That game, 6:30 tonight. And of course, our pal Marshall Ferguson, who was on the program yesterday, it will be doing the call. Tomorrow, Saturday's game, it's Saskatchewan and BC. That's a late game out on the West Coast, and BC was 4-point favorites. They're now 3-point favorites. Saskatchewan getting 3 on the road, and BC minus 149 on the money line with Michael O'Connor as the quarterback. And then the final game, this line hasn't moved all week long, and quite a way to finish this up. Oh, sorry, I should say that BC Saskatchewan game's actually tonight. I misread that. Early game in the East, Hamilton, Toronto. Late game tonight in the doubleheader, Saskatchewan and BC. And tomorrow's game, 6 o'clock. Saving the best for last, I guess. Ottawa, 1-8 on the season, traveling to Edmonton, where the Elks are trying to win for the first time in about 1,100 days at Commonwealth Stadium. Edmonton, 3-point favorites. If you haven't already, now's a great time to take advantage of our introductory offer at CoolBet. Use the promo code WST on your first deposit, and we'll double it, a 100% bonus on that first deposit, up to $200. All right, what a week it's been. Thanks to everyone that has joined us. And don't forget, if you do want to win the marble race, we ask that you give the thumbs up. We're at 170, by the way. That's great right now. Thanks. Let's see if we can get it up to 200. And you do have to be subscribed, so make sure you hit that red subscribe button. And over the course of the weekend, you're talking Bombers and Jets with your friends. Make sure you tell them about Winnipeg Sports Talk, where they can find us, and that they, too, should subscribe to the YouTube channel. And, of course, wherever you get podcasts. All right, well, we're going to see how big this marble race is in just a minute. Alex, I do believe we have the world famous marble race intro song that we want to get queued up, and we can't really do Friday Marbles without the incredible gift to WST listeners from one Tristan Rivers Music. But before we drop the marbles, hit the music.
It's Friday. Another week of work's gone by. You deserve to treat yourself, maybe an ice cream cake or a bottle of rye. Before the whole team, so that's you can't deny. Why use effort even for pleasure? If I'd like to try, it's time to do a marble race. Those who separate men to the worst. Marble race. Just take marbles with the punctuation first. Marble race. Don't spam or you will survive. Marble race. No marble race too late. Set, go.
Yes, ready, set, go. It's about to go down. Marbles time on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And Alex, I don't know if you want to crank your mic open, but and join the program. We'll we'll wait for an official unveiling next week on the program. But what do we know? How many entrants? I know you did a poll of how many marbles we were going to get on the program today. How many do we have in, along with our 4 added contestants of our guest today and the legendary Inches Count?
Yeah, we got 146 in today. So just a hair under 150.
I'm not sure if I can hear. Oh, Alex, yes. Have you closed out the entries? We've got it up there.
Yeah,
It looks
yeah,
like
we're ready to go
We've
here.
got to decide on which we've got to decide on which course we're doing today, but I will leave it in the Marble Master for the first time to choose it. Of course, if you're new here on the program, this is how we finish each and every show on Friday afternoon, and we do have a WST co-branded hoodie with our friends at Canadian Club for the winner. If you do win, well, I'll queue you up, but you're going to need to send an email to winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com, and we'll hook up next week and get you that. We've got all our sizes still in with the exception of XXL, and we'll hope to be getting those soon. All right. Well, folks, it's the end of the week. We got to get the podcast up. So without further ado, I think we are ready to go. Good luck to everyone. And we'll be going to, I think we're going back to the main menu right now. Let's just see what we've got going on. This is the, this is it. We're checking out the courses. Where are we going to go? Few will survive. We've got Shattered Dreams. That was another one. The Lucky Few. I like the Lucky Few. So everyone, if you're in, good luck. And what a great way. What a great game last night. What an awesome week we've had. And I hope Remus, wherever he is having a great few days off. Alex has been with us. And yeah, if we're ready to go, Alex, let's drop the marbles and see who our winner is to finish up this great week on WST. All right, they are off. Tracy Okraniak, Zachary Wynn. I see Zach's in. By the way, nice grab yesterday in that Bison exhibition game. Zach and the Bisons had their first exhibition game yesterday out in Saskatoon. I'll look forward to seeing the herd coming up this week. And wow, coming off that big catch yesterday in Saskatoon, Zachary Wynn is in first place. And Lloyd Olson coming up in second. Oh, and WST legend Les Thompson with a nice start as well. Matt Riddle coming up in second. This is quite the track we've got right now. Zach still in, but we see a real mix here. Kitty Pup 1000, Jeff Hamilton in first place popping into the mix. Wouldn't that be something if the hammer came through? Getting some great looks today of the course as well. But right now it is Phyllis, Matt Riddle, Lloyd Olson, Christian News, and Kirsten is our top 5 right now, but the hammer still in the mix. Hammer is there at 6th place, Doug Phil in 7th as we continue through this section of the marbles. Who it is? Phyllis, Fritchie 101, a former winner as well. Matt Riddle, Lloyd Olson still looking good, but it is a packed crew right now. Phyllis got shot ahead. Somehow. Fritchie 101, wouldn't this be something if Phyllis came through? Another WST legend. Steven Zacharias just got thrown over the top rope. Phyllis, though, in first. We will see who escapes this spinning globe mechanism and who comes out first. Looks like it is Phyllis right now. Right on her heels is Lloyd Olson. Could this be Phyllis's first ever victory in the marble race? It is Phyllis. I think that's Phyllis's first win ever. But damn, it's about time. We've had some great. Phyllis, of course, came out and met all of us when we did the show at Little Brown Jug. Always great to see our regulars get into the winner's circle, especially for the first time. Here we go with our final results. And we'll just keep this going. And I know a few of you have side bets on this, so we'll do a quick rundown of the the full finish. Oh, Cliche Monsters in there as well. Nicely done. But Phyllis is the champ today. Lloyd Olson, Fritchie 101, Mark Sports Video with the strong performance, and the Hammer, Jeff Hamilton, a top 5 finish after doing a little double duty this week on WST. We've got Christian, Matt, Nicholas, Zach Wynn with that great start, finishes top 10 as well, and Ken 007 is our final member of the top 10. Still seeing a few more marbles come in. Pretty and Pionk, former winner as well. There's a Cash Bally. One Bird WB taking his sweet time going on. Will he be the final marble in? We will see. And obviously a number. There it is. Phyllis, our winner. If you can, go to final results. And just so people can go back on the YouTube channel, Alex, if you could just do a quick roll down through the results. So if people need to compare themselves as to where they finished against their buddies, there's a couple of individuals that I know have side bets on this each and every week. And there's Ross at 32. I'm always looking at where Ross Ransby is and where Bozeman is. Oh, Royal Sports 57th. Not bad. Peppermint Patty, nicely done, PP. 61st so far. Chucker Doug Phil had a great start. Probably got caught up on something a little bit later on. Jet Oil Tom. Dallas Paul's 87. Nicely done. Sad Jets fan. It's okay. Hey, there's Bardo. Great to see you, Bardo. Frosty Winnipeg. Dan Jets fan. All the way down to our final. I guess One Bird was the final one that came through. Great Britain is 125th finished, and then a number of marbles that got thrown over the top rope, including T. Will, free Oleg, Hewichenko, T. Konopoli got bounced, as did Gitch Lishka. Well, listen, this has been a lot of fun. I got to give a big, big shout out to Alex for making this happen. I know how much you guys all love the marble race. I was really assuming that we would not make that happen. But Remo, Alex, figuring it out. And I promise you, I know many of you said one of the shows next week will give a challenge on some subs and likes in the show. And we will definitely be bringing Alex on because I know you guys are all so excited to meet him. But listen, it's been a great week. Really happy for Remus to be able to get a few days off. And obviously happy that the show's gone as smoothly without our beloved CTO, and of course, Double A doing a great job. Remo, by the way, yes, as you can see right now, safari planned for today's trip. He's wearing his shirt that Dubs copied off of him, hanging with the giraffes out on a safari today, and looking great good. I'm not sure where Evan and Leah are right now. They might be in the back of the garage. They may be in the back behind the giraffes right now, but Remus having a great time on holidays. Folks, great stuff. Thanks to all the sponsors that have been with us. And shout out. Nice to see everyone giving dap to Alex for making that happen. It was a great way. It's just not Friday without a marble race on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And by the way, for those of you that are wondering where Hacksaw was today, Hacksaw is going to join us on Monday. Perfect day to do it. Lots of NFL preseason action. We'll hit the big stories coming out of the weekend with Hacksaw on Monday, as well as much, much more. Gang, it's the weekend. Have a great one. Crack one for us. Hopefully, maybe as Jeff Hamilton said, maybe we'll see you out on the circuit at some point this weekend. But the one place you can guarantee to see me next is right here, Winnipeg Sports Talk, 1 o'clock Monday afternoon. And don't forget, Thursday night, our big sports trivia night at Little Brown Jug. Would love to see you guys there. Check the description for the Eventbrite link to get your tickets for that. Gang, it's been real. Have a great one. Enjoy that Bomber victory, 10-1. We'll be back with you on Monday to kick off another week of Winnipeg Sports Talk right here. Thanks so much for being with us.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.